My self-righteous sisters wanted me to let them rent out my vacation home for profit, and when I refused, their husbands got involved and are now facing charges. This all happened today. My parents decided to have a barbecue, which I guess is what old people do. I declined because I genuinely dislike my two sisters, their husbands, and their children. My wife and I are childless. My mom then proceeded to pressure my wife. Long story short, we went. When we arrived, there were about 20 people there. My sisters and their husbands were already hammered. My mom spent 100% of her time trying to wrangle the nieces and nephews, who are between the ages of 7 and 11. My dad wisely retreated to the hot tub area with a small cooler full of beer. My wife and I made small talk with some of the other guests, ate some food, and had a frozen margarita. My sisters and their husbands, hereafter referred to as the SLs and husbands, took turns criticizing us for being late, not wearing swimsuits, and generally being party poopers. Whatever, typical suburban summer gathering. About 45 minutes in, two of the kids ran full speed at a neighbor guest who was standing by the pool and pushed her in. She was standing by the pool steps and stumbled, but didn't fall, so she only got half of her body wet. She was understandably not thrilled, but she didn't make a big deal about it, just went to her parents, got a towel, and left. The SLs and husbands, however, thought it was hilarious. A little while later, I was standing a few feet from the pool chatting with someone when I saw out of the corner of my eye three of the kids charging at me at full speed. It was clear I was next. Obviously, it's not hard to dodge small children, but I just moved out of the way at the last second. All three of them went flying into the pool. Most of the other guests, including my wife, laughed, but their moms, as I mentioned, were already wasted and completely freaked out. Apparently, two of the kids can't swim, even though they were in swimsuits. Since I wasn't in swimwear, I backed away from the pool and let other people pull the kids out. The kids were crying hysterically, like they'd lost a limb. That's when all hell broke loose. The four drunk parents started yelling at everyone, especially me, for almost letting their kids drown, and also because the two kids had recorded the prank on their parents' iPhones, which were now at the bottom of the pool. One of my brothers-in-law got in the pool to try and retrieve the phones, but his portly build and high blood alcohol level made it impossible. No one else volunteered to help, which was not surprising, since my sisters were still ranting at everyone. I told my sisters that it was their responsibility to watch their kids, and if anything happened to them, it was on them, not me. Harsh words were exchanged on both sides. My wife and I left after another brother-in-law tripped while yelling at us and fell face first onto the ground. Now they're saying I should have let the little brats knock me into the pool so they could have fun and ruin my phone. So I decided. P.S. My dad, of course, never left the hot tub. Relevant comments and ops thoughts, I realize they are just kids, and they were just playing. It reflects more on their parents than them that they thought this was okay. Just wish we hadn't gone. It was nice to see my parents and their neighbors, but I really dislike my sisters and their husbands. They don't hide their jealousy of us, and it's just exhausting to be around them. More on why Op dislikes certain family members, it's more of a personality clash. I was never close to my sisters, they are 8 and 10 years older than me. I don't have much in common with their husbands either. They are decent enough people, but I just don't care about the things they care about, and vice versa. I know all four of them are somewhat jealous of our lifestyle. Both sisters are stay-at-home moms, and both husbands make good money, one significantly more than I do, but my wife and I both have professional careers. We have no kids, and we are much more responsible with our finances. So, we have more investments, etc., and we don't have to drive around in kid-cluttered cars, and we take a nice vacation or two every year. This definitely chafes the two sisters and, by extension, their husbands, so we are constantly subjected to some petty behavior from them. Basically, my wife and I just don't enjoy being around them, which is why I wanted to skip the get-together. It's just not worth it to me. But my wife is an optimist and is usually happy to see them. Hopefully, your wife won't guilt herself into going next time. That may be the only good thing to come of this. My wife is more tolerant and forgiving of my siblings than I am, but based on what she said on the drive home, I think she's finally had enough of them too. Your dad sounds awesome. Yes, my dad is very chill. He's a people person, used to be in sales, likes everyone to have a good time, and is thoroughly enjoying his retirement. He was just sitting there watching the whole show with two other guys. My mom is a good person too, but this situation stressed her out. The kids are fine. They were inside watching TV when I left. I think they are 7, 9, 10, and 11. It was the middle three that played kamikaze with me. I suspect the 11-year-old was egging them on, she's usually the ringleader. The way you described your parents having a barbecue is a bit odd. I had to shorten the post to fit the character limit. My parents are very outgoing and love to have people over. Their house is great for entertaining, and they'll find any excuse for a get-together. They originally wanted to have everyone over for the 4th of July, but one of my sisters and her family were on vacation, so this was a pseudo 4th of July party, with flags, red, white, and blue decorations, barbecue, a margarita machine, etc. They also promised the kids sparklers. My nieces and nephews were the only kids there. All the neighbors are around my parents' age. Op was voted NTA, not the asshole. Update posted August 17, 2023, almost a month later. First, my parents told me that my nieces and nephews are all good swimmers and use the pool all the time. The 7-year-old is still learning, but he loves the water. My sister just said they couldn't swim to make them seem more pitiful. To be fair, all the kids are banned from the deep end, which is where they fell in. It was the two 10-year-olds and the 9-year-old who tried to push me in. The party ended on a rather sour note after we left. My drunk brother-in-law, who fell face first while yelling at me, had to go to the ER to get stitches on his face. He was too drunk to drive, so my dad took him. Dad was not happy about this. Later that night, my sisters started a group text with some very nasty things. Their husbands added some comments as well. My wife and I blocked all 4 of them. My mom called me, and she was very upset about what they said. She and my dad were in the group chat too, and I don't blame her. Because of those texts, my parents insisted that my sisters and brothers-in-law come over the following Sunday without the kids to clear the air and set some ground rules. In my mom's words, it resulted in a contrite but not heartfelt apology from my siblings via my mom's phone. I was glad my wife was there with me. Her stern look kept me from saying what I wanted to say. I just told them, thank you, and that we didn't feel the need to discuss it further. I thought that was the end of it. I unblocked them that night. I got a text from one of the brothers-in-law telling me how much the phones cost and asking when I was going to reimburse them. Seriously? I replied with an emphatic no. I took a screenshot of his text and forwarded it to my parents with a note saying we were done with this nonsense. We were going no contact with the sisters and spouses, and not to invite us to any holidays or get-togethers if they were going to be there. Then I blocked the sisters and spouses again. That's when things really blew up. My dad called them and ripped them a new one. Among other things, he told them that their grandkids were indefinitely unwelcome at his house due to my mom providing regular free babysitting. This did not go over well with them. He also banned them from using the vacation home and told them that the house was actually owned by my wife and me, not him and my mom. This absolutely floored them. Both of my sisters' families used it all the time, including taking their friends there for weekend getaways. This is completely out of character for my parents. They have clearly had enough. For context, I never wanted my sisters to know we own the house. We bought it for my parents. They had always wanted a place in the mountains. Keeping the ownership quiet was just to avoid drama with my siblings. A few days later, my sisters and their husbands showed up uninvited at our house to apologize. We were out to dinner, and they left a note. One of the sisters also called me at work. I sent the call to voicemail. We decided that no contact for the foreseeable future was the best course of action and haven't interacted with them in over 3 weeks. Personally, I'm done. They can all go jump in a lake. Relevant comments: how's life been? Though it hasn't been a month yet, I have to say that blocking them has actually made our lives noticeably more peaceful. I didn't realize how much constant low-level static they created. It wasn't major toxicity, they aren't bad people, just tiresome and petty, and I personally don't care about them using the weekend cabin. Technically it's ours, but we bought it for our parents, and they control it and decide who uses it when they aren't there. We pay all the operating costs and taxes. One good thing that's come out of this whole mess is that we now know what we're going to do with the place when my parents get older. I was prepared to take over managing it, assigning weekends, doing maintenance, etc., but now we know we're just going to sell it, and if we want to go to the mountains, we'll rent an Airbnb. Ops parents: yes, my parents aren't dummies. They are very easygoing and very much live and let live. I think they'll lighten up on all of this soon, but it's their decision. We still won't be attending any family functions for the foreseeable future. The bad thing for my sisters is that they are probably very worried that I'm going to block them from using the cabin. I won't, that's up to mom and dad until they get too old. This also ends one of my sister's fantasies of building a family compound there when we inherit the property, which I knew about but just brushed off. Usually, there's only one buildable area on lots there, but this lot is much bigger since it's at the end of the road. You could easily build 3 houses with great views on that property. They aren't really sorry, they just want something from you. I completely agree. Their apologies weren't sincere, and I have no plans to interact with them anytime soon. Regarding them using the vacation home, that's really my parents' decision. Yes, I technically own it and pay all the bills, but I bought it for them and gave them day-to-day control. They are good people, and they've always wanted a place for the family to vacation, but there's no way they could have afforded it themselves. I could afford to buy it for them because I've been financially fortunate and have saved and invested like a demon, and I got a nice bonus the year I sold my house and moved in with my now wife. I don't care if my parents let my siblings use the place, but I have to admit I enjoyed my sister's discomfort when they found out I had the means to buy the place and let my parents use it without ever mentioning it to them. Dad changed the lock code on the door last week when they were up there, so now only he, mom, my wife, and I have the code. Regarding mom taking care of the kids, she told me that she and sometimes dad go to each sister's house once a week and spend the day with the kids. After school starts, she plans to pick up each family's kids from school on different days of the week and spend the evening with them. She said having all 5 of them together was stressful, but it's fine when it's 1 or 2 at a time. Both mom and dad have told me they have no plans to have my sisters and their families back at their house for the foreseeable future and that they are enjoying the peace and quiet. I guess they were tired of the old dynamic and used the pool party fiasco as an excuse to change some relationships. An interesting note about why someone's post was removed from a certain subreddit. According to a message I just read from a moderator on another subreddit, the reason was that violence is property damage. I still don't get it. Phones were ruined, I guess it's ridiculous. Updated update, August 26, 2023, 9 days after the previous post. Well, the last few days have been interesting. I thought things had already blown up, but that was just a fart in the wind compared to what's happened this week. To make this all make sense, I need to give some financial background. My parents have never been good at saving money. I've been doing their taxes for years, so I know pretty much all of their financial situation. Their house is paid off, and they have very little debt, but they haven't saved much for retirement. They both collect Social Security, Dad has a decent pension, and they have some savings, but there's no buried treasure in the basement. I bought them their current car after they retired as a retirement gift so they could have a nicer car. It's probably the first car they've owned in almost 20 years that wasn't leased. My sisters are under the firm belief that my parents are loaded and that they'll leave everything to the 2 of them since I don't need the money, so they've never bothered to save either. As it turns out, my older sister and her husband, they have 3 kids, have been living beyond their means for a long time and are facing financial ruin. They've maxed out their credit cards and are behind on their car lease payments. One of their cars is about to be repossessed. He used to brag about how much he made a year, but it turns out it was only about half that. She confessed all of this to my mom on Tuesday because they need a loan, and this was a bombshell for mom and dad, for the past 3 years, she hasn't actually been staying at the vacation home most of the time. She's been renting it out about once a month and pocketing the money. We're talking over $2,000 a weekend and at least $4,000 a week. Since she's been banned from using the place, she had to cancel a group that had already booked it. She's now worried they are going to lose everything. My other sister knew she was renting it out but, of course, never said anything. I suspect she was doing the same thing because I went up there once to drop off a 4-wheeler I had fixed, and there was a family there who claimed they were staying there with my sister's family, and they had gone into town to run errands. I didn't press it at the time, I just assumed she had lent the place to some friends, but I was always suspicious. I found out about all of this through my parents, they are extremely stressed about it. Mom is more worried than Dad, he's mostly just angry about the whole thing. I know Dad feels betrayed, and I think he's embarrassed that he's not in a position to help his daughter. He has reiterated that as long as it's up to him, his daughters won't be using the vacation home anytime soon. My parents told me what was going on because they figured my sisters would be coming after me next, and they were right. On Thursday, my sisters, again without their husbands, showed up at our house and waited outside for me to get home. I was stuck between having an argument with them in public, which they were threatening to do if I didn't let them in, and letting them in, so I let them in. I got an earful from my older sister, with my younger sister chiming in, about why I needed to let them use the mountain house again. They also immediately jumped to saying I was a terrible brother and that I needed to step up and plan to pay for their kids' college because that's what family does. I let them tell their story and then called them out on everything based on what my parents had told me. Things went downhill from there. There was denial, crying, cursing, yelling, the whole 9 yards. I swear my ears are still ringing. I won't deny I said some very harsh and nasty things to them, but nothing that wasn't true. After about an hour, they finally left. I took a shower and laid down after that. When I got up, my wife was home, and the first thing she said was that she had to block more phone numbers because my sisters were calling us nonstop from new numbers. My parents texted me yesterday and asked me to call them. I'm sure my sisters have given them their version of what happened, but I'm not ready to rehash it all again yet. I'm usually a pretty high energy person, but this whole saga has drained me. I barely had enough energy to drive up to the vacation home today and put a padlock on the entrance gate. I'm the only one who has the key. I guess that will keep my siblings from bothering the place anymore. They'd have to hike up a 400-yard incline to even get to the house. New updates from here on out. Update 3, posted September 12, 2023, 2.5 weeks since the last update. Another update on my train wreck of a family. Given what's happened over the past couple of weeks, I figured it was time for an update. After my sisters came to my house, my mom and dad told me they didn't want to manage the vacation home anymore. Apparently, the sisters had been putting a lot of pressure on them to let them use it again. Basically, my parents dumped the responsibility of managing it on me and told me it was my problem now. Prior to this, they were the ones who kept track of who was using it when, and they handled routine maintenance, replacing worn-out items, etc. While I don't blame them, I am disappointed because that damn place was supposed to be for them to enjoy and hang out at, and they used it often. Plus, I never cared if they let my sisters and their families use it because I always thought of it as my parents' house, even though I technically owned it. But now that it's in a situation where they can't use it without my involvement, it changes everything. I've taken some steps to secure the place. I already mentioned I padlocked the gate. It has a heavy-duty chain and the best lock I could find. I also completely reset the keypads on all the doors and created all new codes. I had security cameras installed yesterday, which is actually pretty cool because the installers convinced me to get a high-resolution camera that overlooks the valley. The system cost me more than I wanted to spend, but the peace of mind is worth it. The installers also put up signs on the property stating that it is under video surveillance. I also installed a heavy-duty lock to lock the water shutoff valve. I kind of wish I would lose the key to that one because it's going to be a real pain to remove if I do. I haven't told anyone, only my wife knows the water is off, and only we have the key. Last week, I got separate phone calls at my office from both brothers-in-law trying to convince me to let them use the place like they used to. The older one had gone up there with some friends for a guy's weekend but couldn't get in because of the locked gate. He was furious and embarrassed about being locked out. I'm sure he would have broken the lock if he could have. In his call, he kept switching between being aggressive and playing the victim. At one point, he threatened to rip the damn gate off the ground. He also admitted they had been renting the place out to some friends because they needed the money, and I had ruined their business, and I should reimburse their guests. I freaking should have recorded the conversation with him, but I don't know how to record from my office phone. Anyway, the other brother-in-law sounded like my sister was making him make the call. He didn't really argue when I told him they couldn't use it anymore. Anyway, I told them they couldn't use it and not to ask again. At this point, I'm considering selling the vacation home. My wife and I don't use it often enough to justify keeping it, and there won't be any family gatherings there anytime soon. I mentioned selling it to my parents, and their reaction was pretty much whatever. I'd make more than double what I paid for it if I sold it. It includes 3 lots with great views and is at the end of a private road, but I'll probably wait a while before selling. Doing it now would be an emotional decision. My sisters and I are currently not speaking, and I have no plans to initiate contact. I don't know what the situation is between them and my parents, and I don't want to know. On the bright side, we spent an evening with my parents last week and went to a nice new restaurant, and no one brought up any of this crap. Mom did give us updates on what the nieces and nephews have been up to. She's been spending time with them at their houses. Sorry this update wasn't full of laughs or comebacks, it is what it is. Update posted October 16, 2023, a month later. Some people have asked for an update, so here you go. I hired someone to manage and watch over the vacation home. He lives in the area, takes care of his family, and manages quite a few properties, some vacation rentals and some weekend homes like ours. He can check my camera feeds and does a physical check every week or two. I think he might have one of the best jobs in the mountains. He gets paid to drive around, walk his dog, and hang out on other people's decks whenever he wants. He also can get camera feeds from a house near the start of the private road that takes still pictures when a vehicle goes by. It's $450 a month, plus he bills hourly for basic maintenance and repairs. He's friends with all the sheriff's deputies up there. This gives me a lot of peace of mind, and he sends us pictures of his walks up there once or twice a week. I have to brag on my parents a little bit. I found out about this all at dinner with them tonight. They have been getting pressure from my sisters to have me open the vacation home to everyone for Thanksgiving. It has become a tradition for the family to spend Thanksgiving there, not for my wife and me. We've gone like 5 times in as many years. They wanted to have it there again this year. My parents refused. They told my sisters that if they want to spend Thanksgiving in the mountains, they can rent their own place. This did not go over well with my sisters. They called me and proceeded to yell at me for ruining the family tradition and that I should let them use the place. I told them they should have thought of that earlier and that I didn't want to talk about it anymore. I hung up. My parents told me they completely have my back and that they are done with my sisters' antics. They also told me they have told my sisters that they are no longer going to be the go-between between me and them. I am very grateful for my parents' support. It makes it a lot easier for me to hold my ground. I'm still not speaking to my sisters, and I have no plans to anytime soon. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I need to prioritize my mental health. I hope this all eventually blows over, but in the meantime, I'm going to continue to do what's best for me. Regarding selling the vacation home, I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to sell the vacation home. I'm weighing all my options. I might rent it out, or I might continue to hold on to it. I'm going to take some time to make a decision. I don't want to rush into anything. Regarding the property manager, I'm very happy with the property manager I hired. He's doing a great job. He's a reliable guy, and he's made my life a lot easier. I highly recommend hiring a property manager to anyone who needs help managing a property. Overall, things are still messy, but I'm doing my best to navigate it all. I'm grateful for the support of my wife and parents. It's getting me through this. I'll continue to provide updates as things develop. My father has refused to bother me about this anymore, knowing I'd say no. They came up with a plan that I thought was pretty good, announcing they'd have Thanksgiving either at a rented Airbnb in the mountains if everyone chipped in beforehand, or at their house, or one of the sisters could host. This caused a rift between the sisters, as my middle sister was all for the Airbnb, but my older sister was strapped for cash. The deadline to commit to the Airbnb has passed, and it looks like Thanksgiving will be at my parents' house. We won't be there regardless. My parents asked us not to sell the house just yet. They decided they still want to use it occasionally, but only after my sisters have accepted the new normal. Of course, they might be happy if everyone could gather there again in the future, but that's not going to happen. I'd rather sell it now and move on, but I can live with keeping it if my parents use it now and then, and it'll likely appreciate in value. My wife and I have been no contact with my sisters and their husbands. Both sisters have called using new numbers, screw your Google Voice, and left voicemails insisting I meet with them to discuss how everyone can use the family vacation home, for my parents' sake. They've called my wife too. I'm glad I've gotten into the habit of not answering numbers I don't recognize. I honestly don't know if they're delusional or think they can bully me into giving them access again. Don't care. My parents told me my older sister and her husband are getting out of their SUV and large truck leases and are selling their jet skis and some other stuff they never use. This is going to be really hard for her. She's very image conscious and won't like being seen driving something older, smaller, and cheaper. Bill's self-worth is very much tied to his truck. He even has a little tattoo of the truck company's logo, which, frankly, is one of the reasons I've never hung out with him. Several people have suggested I turn the vacation home into an Airbnb. I'm not planning on doing that anytime soon. I know it would make money, but it would cause unbelievable drama in the family and put stress on my parents. They don't need that. It would also be a hassle to remove my parents' personal belongings from there. They have nowhere to go, and it would cause wear and tear on the house, and I'm sure it would take up some of my time, even if I hired a manager to handle it, so it's not worth it to me. Post 5 updated November 27, 2023. A month and a half later, I wrote most of this yesterday but decided to wait until I was less agitated to post it. Waiting didn't help, I'm still agitated. Apologies if this is long, a lot has happened, and it's hard to write it coherently. Things have escalated big time. I honestly didn't see this coming. Long story short, both of my brothers-in-law broke into my vacation home and were arrested. They were charged with trespassing, property damage, and making threats, all Class 1 misdemeanors. I'm refusing to drop the charges. I might consider it if they pay for all the damages in full. As of Saturday night, they were still in jail. I think they're out now. Things had at least been quiet, I thought. Over 6 weeks of no contact from my sisters. My parents went to the house for a week and had a great time. David, the property manager I hired, has been doing a great job. He did some repairs I asked him to do, and I gave him a list he'll be working through. He usually sends his clients a picture or two a week of wildlife or the sunset, which kind of made me want to go there the Friday after Thanksgiving. My brothers-in-law went to my vacation home. They used an angle grinder to cut the chain on the driveway gate, damaging the gate in the process. They tried to get in through the front door, messing up the lock set and badly scratching the door. They finally got in through the utility room door and an interior locked door. They also broke into the barn, I'm not sure why. As they were leaving through the front door, they encountered the sheriff and David. David got an activity notification from the camera system. He saw what was happening and called the police. According to David, the brothers-in-law tried to make excuses, but the officers weren't buying it. Breaking into a vacant house there is a big deal. It's usually junkies ransacking the place and pawning everything. When the brothers-in-law were arrested, they were freaking out, saying they were going to kick my ass and stuff, which wasn't smart to say in front of the police. David and the sheriff's office tried to call my wife and me to see what we wanted to do, but we were with her parents that day and had left our phones in the car so we could be in vacation mode, so they arrested the brothers-in-law on all charges, which is what I would have asked them to do. The brothers-in-law called their wives from jail, who, of course, freaked out. They called my parents, tried to call me, they're blocked, trying to find a lawyer there to arrange bail, which wasn't easy because it was a rural area and a holiday weekend. My older sister is broke, her cards are maxed out, so my middle sister had to pay for both of their husbands if they got bail. I know they were still in jail as of Saturday afternoon. We didn't check our phones until late Friday night on our way home from her parents' house. We had a ton of missed calls and voicemails from my mom, dad, David, and the sheriff's office. It really ruined a nice day. I was in a great mood before I looked at my phone. My wife read the texts, listened to the voicemails, and read them to me, and by the time we got home, I had a pretty good idea of what had happened. I put my brain back into thinking mode, trying to get rid of my anger, failed, called David, and got the rundown of what happened and how bad the damage was, which just made me angrier. I ended Friday by calling the sheriff's office and telling them there was no misunderstanding, the brothers-in-law had absolutely no right to be on my property, and I wanted to press charges. I didn't call my parents back and barely slept. I waited until Saturday afternoon to call my parents. They were both very upset about all of this, especially my mom. My sisters had pressured them to tell me I should tell the police it was all a mistake and that I wanted to drop the charges. I flatly refused, telling them I wouldn't do that until I talked to a lawyer and until I received full compensation to fix everything. My mom was crying pretty hard when we hung up, which, of course, made me feel terrible. My dad suggested it was time for a clean break completely, but also said he thought they needed to pay for the damages. I haven't been to the house yet, there's nothing I can do, and I'll probably lose it when I see the damage in person. The pictures were bad enough. I'm hoping to go up there tomorrow or Wednesday, but my job isn't one I can just leave unless it's an emergency. I've left messages with 2 lawyer friends asking them to recommend the right kind of lawyer to deal with my sisters and brothers-in-law. I don't know exactly what I can do, but I'm hoping to get restraining orders. I have all the text messages they sent me, which might help. I'm seriously considering suing them for the money they made renting the house. I don't care about the money, it's to make it as painful as possible for them. I'm showing absolutely no mercy at this point. A few side notes. 1. The brothers-in-law had no idea I had someone watching the place or that there are cameras now. My parents knew but didn't tell them because they knew it would just cause drama there with my sisters. There are signs on the property stating that it's under camera surveillance and no trespassing signs. 2. My wife is completely done with this. I don't blame her, she's been incredibly patient with all of this, but she's reached her breaking point and has flat out told me. She told me it's up to me how I handle it, but she thinks they all need a serious lesson. She's drawing a line in the sand and I'm guessing she won't be involved from now on, other than listening to me vent. 3. My older sister's husband probably won't face any consequences at work because of this, but my middle sister's husband has a security clearance, so he might. I'm hoping that will be the motivation he needs to pay for the damages immediately. 4. David, the manager, has an interesting background. I knew he was friends with some of the deputies, thinking it was because they were all locals. I was wrong, he was a police officer in a big city years ago and was shot in the line of duty, after which he decided to retire and move where his parents had retired. He has PTSD because of it, and his dog is a certified service dog that's usually with him. I know law enforcement tends to stick together, and I guess that's how they became friends. 5. I don't want to see or speak to these jerks for the rest of my life. I know that directly conflicts with my strong desire to make their lives as miserable as possible. Related comment, a lot of people said I should have come down hard on all of this from the beginning. I've avoided doing that because it would put stress on my parents, and I hate this kind of drama, but screw it, they're stressed now. My wife is pretty much tapped out on anything related to this and doesn't want to hear about it anymore and said it's all on me. She's drawing a line in the sand, and I'm guessing she won't be involved from now on, other than listening to me vent. Edit, regarding why they broke in, this is just my personal guess, but I think they were planning on using it for family vacations and renting it out again. According to David, the property manager, it's hunting season now through the end of the year. I know the brothers-in-law have used it in the past as a base for big group hunting weeks. It sleeps a lot of people, so hosting an event with friends could net them a few $1,000s. Again, this is just my guess, but it would explain why they broke into the barn too. I bought a 6-seater mule a few years ago that they would use. I don't think they wanted to trash the place, it means a lot to my dad, and they all like him. Post 6 updated December 2, 2023. 5 days later, Saturday, December 2, 2023. I didn't expect to have to post again so soon, but a lot has happened in the last 2 days. Long story short, I think this whole mess has taken a turn for the better. Thursday afternoon at my office, I received an envelope via courier containing a letter signed by both of my brothers-in-law and a cashier's check for $5,000. In the letter, they expressed what I have to say were very sincere apologies. Among other things, they admitted to the break-in, acknowledged it was wrong, said the $5,000 was for damages, and that they would pay more if it cost more. It also said they would stay away from the vacation home unless my wife and I specifically invited them. They also asked that I drop the charges if at all possible, as they could both lose their jobs because of it, and that they would agree to a restraining order or whatever else was needed to make that happen. There was more to it, all conciliatory, but that's the gist. To say this was a shock is an understatement, it's completely opposite of their past behavior. I already had an appointment with a lawyer to discuss suing my brothers-in-law for damages and trying to get a restraining order. I called him and told him what I had just received, and he agreed to meet with me later that day instead of next week, telling me not to deposit the check. We talked for about 2 hours. He ultimately recommended that my wife and I reach a settlement and mutual release agreement with the 4 of them, sisters and brothers-in-law. He said if we pursued them through the courts, we'd almost certainly win, but it could take 2 years or more. There would be considerable upfront legal fees, and we might never collect any money. He also said we could absolutely keep the $5,000 even if we didn't let them off the hook. He's drafting the agreement, which won't be ready until Monday. The agreement will include what amounts to a civil restraining order. I've asked my property manager to put together a quote for repairing the damage. I called him after the meeting and asked him to get me an estimate as close as possible ASAP. Got the estimate Friday. He thinks it will cost around $4,000 to fix everything, most of which is the front door. Friday, my lawyer contacted each of the brothers-in-law, told them about the offer we were making, and advised them to hire their own lawyers. They both agreed. My middle sister's husband told them they could afford to either pay for the damages or pay for lawyers, but not both, and that they didn't think lawyers would do any good since they really had no defense for what they did. His biggest concern is if the charges can be dropped. From what I've been told, they are willing to do anything, sign anything, to make this all go away. My lawyer also called the DA's office Friday to discuss dropping the charges, got the name of the prosecutor and left a message for them, but hasn't talked to them yet. He thinks they will drop the charges since the brothers-in-law are paying restitution and they have no prior records, but then again, he's not a criminal lawyer. He also said I should be prepared to drive up there Monday or Tuesday and tell the prosecutor in person that I want to drop all charges. He also advised me to continue no contact with my sisters and brothers-in-law, especially for the next 6 months, and that it's very important to adhere to the terms of the agreement in any future interactions with them. My guess is the brothers-in-law changed their tune because they figured out the stakes of this for them and what it would cost them in legal fees, fines, etc. There's also the very real possibility they could face up to 120 days in jail, and as I mentioned, one of them has a security clearance for his job, which could be in jeopardy. So this is their last-ditch effort to try and maintain some semblance of a normal life. This isn't a perfect solution, but at least it will get me out of the legal and financial mess I've been in for the last few months. I doubt I'll have any civil relations with any of them again, which is fine. All I want at this point is for this to be over so I can move on with my life and never speak to any of them again. I'm exhausted, and my wife feels the same way. On a side note, getting the written apology was a pretty big moment for me. I never expected that, but it clearly meant something to me. At this point, the money doesn't feel particularly important, but I'm definitely taking it. And I'm pretty sure my middle sister and her husband came up with the money. The cashier's check was from his work's credit union. Once everything is signed, I plan on doing one more update, maybe just editing this post. I apologize for being so long-winded in these posts, but it's helped me clear my head, and the feedback has been really helpful. I truly appreciate everyone's comments, insights, and support, and I really hope you never have to go through this kind of nonsense. Related comment: honestly, I cried from relief when I finally got home Thursday night, thinking this might all be over. I'm not going to discuss this settlement with my parents until everyone has signed the agreement. My sisters and brothers-in-law can do whatever they want, but I'm not. This is between me and them. Final update, December 7, 2023. 5 days later, Tuesday morning, December 7, 2023. I met with my lawyer, reviewed the agreement, made a few minor changes, and he sent it off to my sisters and brothers-in-law. The agreement included a requirement that they pay my legal fees, which were about $3,000. They weren't happy about this and tried to negotiate it out, but he told them it was take it or leave it, and we would proceed with suing them for the money they made renting the property, the wear and tear from the rentals, the repair costs from their break-in, emotional distress, lost income from dealing with this, legal fees, and anything else we could go after. He also told them I would work with the DA's office to prosecute every single charge. Long story short, they came in and signed. I wasn't there. I heard it was a pretty tense environment. The middle brother-in-law seemed to be running the show and at one point told both of my sisters to shut up or he was walking out of the whole thing and making a separate deal with us, and everyone else could go to hell. They provided another cashier's check for $2,500, claiming that was all the money they had. It was close enough to what we were asking, so we're going to accept it as final payment. The lawyer also told me everyone was very cold and short with each other, but they all managed to keep it together until they signed and left without too much of a scene. I drove up to the vacation home early yesterday morning to check out the damage and meet with the DA's office. Seeing the damage just reignited my anger. It was so pointless. I was so mad that I was ready to just eat the repair costs myself and dedicate my life to ruining theirs. I tried to walk it off, but that completely failed, and I ended up calling a good friend who was nice enough to stay on the phone with me for over an hour while I vented and raged. He eventually got me refocused on the bigger picture of putting this all behind me and moving on with my life. Honestly, I'm still not sure if that's what I want to do, but I calmed down after I ate something and felt much better after lunch. I went to the DA's office, without an appointment, had to wait a while, but did get to meet with the assistant DA handling the case. Long story short, since I didn't want to press charges and the brothers-in-law had paid restitution, they were willing to drop all charges except for the trespassing, which will be a Class 2 misdemeanor. The brothers-in-law will have to plead guilty to that and pay whatever fines the judge sets. I was also told it would look very bad for them if they contested the trespassing charge or had any misconduct in public there. The fact that the brothers-in-law didn't resist arrest helped them out. If they had, none of the charges would have been dropped. I also went to the sheriff's office to thank them for responding so quickly and handling everything, wanting to thank the deputies in person, but only talked to the dispatcher. I tried to meet up with David, the property manager, but wasn't able to connect with him. A few notes: the agreement includes a no-contact clause, basically saying if any of them show up where my wife and I are, or vice versa, whoever arrived last has to leave immediately. There is to be no contact except through lawyers or another mutually agreed upon third party. They get to keep all the money they made renting the vacation home, which was a huge concession on my part, unless I have tax consequences because of it, which they will be responsible for, and we release each other from all other liability as of now. There was more to it, but those are the highlights. My wife and I will be signing the agreement later today. After that, I can't talk about most of it, but I can speak around it. I think this is the final update on all of this nonsense, but I will respond to comments as I'm able. As I've said before, posting about all of this and reading everyone's thoughts and responses has been really helpful and probably was key in me being able to handle this in a relatively healthy way, so thanks again to everyone. Related comment: it's hard for me not to hold a grudge, but right now I'm glad I'm not. I might regret it if they cause more trouble in the future, but if they abide by the agreement, that won't happen. As you said, the family relationships are pretty much completely broken. I've only told my parents we're working things out and haven't said much more than that. They may or may not agree with how things are going forward, but I have to do what's best for my wife and me. I'm guessing my sisters have given them a very one-sided account of everything, which is just another unpleasant thing I have to deal with. The agreement, really, is more of a formalization of how things have been for the past few months. I know this isn't how my parents wanted things to go, but I'm reasonably okay with it. Have your sisters exhibited this level of entitlement before? Not really, at least not towards me. We used to have an okay relationship, never super close, but not enemies. Looking back, they started resenting me when I bought my loft when I was 25. Neither of them owned homes at the time but were both with their future husbands. They definitely didn't like that I bought a place before them. Things got worse when I met my wife. They didn't like that she came from a wealthy family, especially since my own business was doing well at the time. They accused me of being a snob and things like that. When we got married, I moved in with my wife to her condo, which was close to where she was doing her residency, and I sold the loft. Our wedding was nice but reasonable, but my sisters were definitely jealous. After that, they and their husbands became pretty petty, and we started minimizing contact with them. The profit from selling the loft, being frugal, and not having a house payment allowed me to buy the vacation home for my parents. My parents agreed to keep it quiet that I owned it and not them, because they knew my sisters would be upset and say I was using my wife's money. I wasn't. Most of our finances are separate, although not having a house payment definitely helped me. Up until this whole mess started, I actually thought we were on okay terms overall. Our day-to-day lives are very different, and I can't pretend I enjoy being around them for more than half a day, but I didn't think they hated me. I knew both sisters had become quite spoiled and entitled, but that had nothing to do with me, and I hadn't had any real conflicts with my brothers-in-law, just that I had very little in common with them. Geez, I guess that's a long way of saying I had no idea they were all like this. One final thought: my little fantasy right now is that I never hear from them again. And that concludes the story. A little extra. I spent a considerable amount of time and effort, like trekking through the Arctic, freezing cold, to translate and find this story. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving it a like and sharing this video. Also, please follow and subscribe to my channel for more support and encouragement. Thank you.